Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I'm your co-host, Mohamed Saleh. With me is my other co-host, John Dyer. And today, we're going to continue our conversations around organizational change. And in change, there's a lot of development that's often needed in this new system that we're trying to adapt. So today's focus is going to be on training. How do organizations train? What works? What doesn't work? And so, John, I know we've had these conversations for many years now on how we train organizations on this new way of thinking. And so why don't you lead us in this conversation? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been interested in this realm for a long, long time, most of my career. How do adults learn? How do they absorb information? How does it stick with them? It's one thing to train them, but how does it, will they remember it 6 months from now or a year from now? And the reason I got into this to begin with we go way back into my early General Electric days. I was a process engineer on the shop floor in major appliances. Okay. And this was before, any of this stuff, right? Before Lean, Six Sigma. But the executives felt that everyone needed to understand what statistical process control was all about, SPC. So those of you that are big Six Sigma fans, there's a lot of math, a lot of analytical work, a lot of data analysis, all that stuff. So GE had this mandatory training that every white collar employee had to go through. And it was so bad that I still remember it. It's one of those things where it was the instructors were very, very dry, very, very boring. It was 4 hours every Wednesday afternoon for 10 weeks. And so we would go to the training class. And the first thing I noticed was that 10 minutes into the training, no one was listening to the instructor, right? You had supervisors that had notebooks propped up, and behind that, they were filling out timesheets. You had engineers that were doodling different design concepts on paper. No one was paying any attention. So it was basically 4 hours of wasted time. And that started really getting me interested in how do you engage people? How do you, because the training was important. I mean, the concepts we were discussing were needed, but it was just being approached completely wrong. So soon after that, I got the opportunity to go around and for a couple of years collect best practices. And that was one of the things I really honed in on, was what were some of the teaching techniques that people would use to really make things memorable, make things understandable, really make things click, no matter what your educational level is, because I truly believe that everyone in an organization needs to be trained in at least the basics of Lean. So you've got some people who don't have a high school education all the way up to people who have, doctorate degrees. Well, guess what? People who have doctorate degrees, if you don't make the training interesting and engaging, aren't going to learn either. Compared to the person that doesn't have a high school degree, so it's gotta be equally understandable and memorable for everybody. Um, so I got the opportunity to see like a Stephen Covey who wrote The Seven Habits. I got to go through some of his training classes. How did he make what he wrote in his book memorable? I got to see a guy by the name of Brian Joyner who sponsored the team handbook, and he brought a lot of what Dr. Deming taught to life with
Yeah.
various hands-on activities that were engaging, that had people working, that had people out of their seats, participating in things. And all of these different best practices came together and into a class that I developed that was basically 2 days of very intense hands-on training. Another thing that I learned throughout all this, again, the way adults learn, we basically, as adults in general, have an attention span of about 10 to 15 minutes, right? So if you're not constantly changing your approach or getting them engaged or asking questions or doing something different every 10 to 15 minutes, you start losing your audience. And I've seen that. I mean, I can be like,
I do too.
hey, we're just going to do the introductions, and people like take a little too long in introducing themselves. And if that goes beyond 10 to 15 minutes, people start,
It's over.
checking out.
Yep.
So it's little things like that that are critically important when you're designing your training classes and curriculum to engage in, to say, okay, let me look at the timeline, and do I have something different happening every 10 to 15 minutes? Now, if you're successful, it's tremendous. And that's one of the things I love about training, being a trainer, is seeing that success. You wouldn't believe how many times I've done a training class where, like, I'll have a group of machinists that'll come in and they're super grumpy, right? They come in the morning and their arms are crossed and they sit down and they're like, I don't want to be here. This is a big waste of my time. I could be out there machining parts, and you're in here wasting, we're not going to learn a thing. This is going to be boring, not going to have it. And then if you have a good, well-designed training class where they start getting engaged, they start learning, they start participating, they get hands-on stuff. I've got a lot of activities that are like simulations where they literally have to take stuff apart and analyze, see how it goes together, and try to figure it out. And it engages their brains. And I've literally had people that'll be like, I don't want to go home. I mean, we want to stay to keep working on this. We want to solve this. I'm like, guys, your shift is over. We're not paying overtime. And they're like, I don't care. I want to stay. I want to see, I want to take this to the next level. And I'm like, okay, you're welcome. I'll stick around if you want to do that. But you're no longer part of the training class.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's really, really cool. I've had one machinist as an example, um, was so negative starting off and just got to the point where by the end of the day he was loving it so much. The next morning he brought me in a big basket of freshly laid eggs because he was a farmer,
Whoa.
outside, and he was like, John, he was like, John, I wanted to bring this to you as a token of my appreciation for what you're doing for us. And I was like, that's cool, right?
That says something when people are like just that thankful.
Yeah.
Um, you
Yeah.
know,
So, yeah, if you structure it right, don't be like that class from GE where it was just monotone, boring lecture for 4 hours, and you lose your audience in 10 minutes. And again, Lean is all about elimination of waste. To me, that is very wasteful.
yeah. I have had the opportunity in my life to be on both ends of both sides of the training. I was the learner and the student, and I know what got me going and what got me not going. and what disengaged me and what engaged me. And I was also the instructor. And at one point, I wanted to kind of up my game in training. And I brought a teacher to come in that was specialized in adult learning to critique how I was training. And she did that over a 6 month period, and I got a lot of blunt feedback from her. But two things that really stood out to me, you already covered the first one, where she said you had to have 10 to 15 minute, she called them learning cycles. I started calling them sprints over the years. Of like, there's a learning nugget that you need to deliver in 15 minutes. And I'll talk about the vehicles that she kind of told me about that I could use during those. But if a nugget goes beyond 15 minutes, you'll lose the attention span of an adult. And honestly, nowadays, you'll probably lose the attention span of anyone because of social media. And so,
And it may be now less than 5 minutes. I mean, you're right. You know, people can't stand watching commercials anymore, right? Because it's like I gotta get to
what's your
something.
point?
So
I need to move on.
right.
But there are things that she was really honed in on, and I just want to kind of highlight a few of those. So the first one is those learning cycles, 15 minutes and do them. The other she said is within that learning cycle, and she wasn't she I don't think she understood that she was using the A3 process when she was trying to coach me, but she was. And she said, do you understand their current state? Like, you're teaching them something, having this assumption they don't know. But if they do know, it's gonna feel like you're talking down to them. And so she said, you need to first assess their current state. So you need to run something to assess where are all of them. So you're going to teach, how do you coach? Okay, maybe you break them up into teams and ask them first, how do you get coached today? Let them download the current state first before you build upon that current state. And so now it's kind of been drained into me is anytime I teach a new skill or a new concept or a new tool, I break out into an exercise saying, and it doesn't have to be the exact same thing, just to kind of assess what their current state is. And so if I'm going to ask them, how I'm going to teach you how to coach, then I'm going to ask you first, hey, how have you been coached in the past? How do you coach today? And what worked and what didn't work? Let's put that all on paper. And then let me add my 2 cents into that. Some of it might marry what you're already doing, and some of it might not, but I need a current state to build off so I know what the learner needs to know what to improve upon. So I thought that was an eye opener.
You
The
know,
Go ahead.
to build on that real quick, that's why I love simulation so much, right? Where you basically set up a process that is very, very flawed, and then have the team work on improving that process. Because one thing is they're usually very reluctant to at this stage in their getting to know you, because the trust isn't there, to throw stones at their what they do in real work, right? Oh, I don't want to tear apart our current process because I don't know you, I don't trust you. Or they may be people from several different departments that have lots of different processes. So if you give them a fictitious simulation to work on, well, now they can do a process map and uncover all the flaws of the current state very openly, because they're tearing apart something that they're not vested in. And that opens them up to eventually get to the point where they're willing to start looking at their current state of their real process in a more objective way.
Yeah, you're 100% right. One thing, she didn't need to tell me this, I kind of knew this on my own, and you're alluding to it to some degree right now, is lectures only don't work. Like if you are an organization that books like a week for lean training, and then after you're done, that's it. Just know that you just wasted everyone's time. And so that was one thing that I kind of walked away with. The other thing is that I walked away with is one size doesn't fit all. And so you need to understand the context of what you're training, and the audience of who you're training, and make your conversations applicable to them. You need to meet them; they can't meet you. And a lot of times, teachers would go out there and talk and expect each person is going to come, almost like a classroom in a university. They'll come to you and learn from you because you're the teacher. Where in I think more adult learning is you need to go to them. And so if I have a room of someone from HR and someone from IT and someone from the shop floor, I need to make my stories relevant to an IT example. I need to make my stories relevant to an HR example. I need to make my stories relevant to an operation example. I can't be talking to an audience because that's what I'm comfortable with and expect everyone else to plug and play. So that was another thing that I walked away with. And
Uh,
I'm big on storytelling.
Yeah.
So I use stories to make my nuggets memorable. And so I found that works. I found that keeps people engaged. I found people that are recalling the stories and now learning the tools and understanding the why because the story highlights the why. So I thought that was those are approaches that I have found in those little learning cycles to work well.
Yeah. Back to what you were saying about it's got to be relevant to what they're
Yeah,
doing. See, I would totally agree with that. And where I think the biggest impact is when they reach the conclusion themselves,
100%.
right? When they have those aha moments, I love that. When
Yep.
the light bulb goes off, I mean, I've been doing this for so long now, it's almost like I can actually see it happen.
Yep.
All of a sudden they're struggling. Boy, I don't know. I don't get this. I don't understand. Then all of a sudden it's like, bam, that's why we need to do this. Oh, now it makes perfect sense. Now I understand. Now I see it. And it's like, I didn't have to tell them what the final answer was. They reached that conclusion themselves. That'll cause it to be internalized to the point where they'll never forget that.
Yeah.
It's just like process mapping is a good example. You can explain what process mapping is until you're blue in the face, right? But until they all of a sudden see the waste become visual, see the problems become visual, they can start to see those ugly steps that start popping up, and then all of a sudden it's just like, dang, this is so much worse than I thought.
Yeah.
That's why we need to do this. That's why we need to do process maps. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, process mapping isn't just some random exercise that we're going to force you to go through. No, it's a tool to really help you figure out how to identify the waste and get rid of it. And then it's just like, wow, we need to map everything. It's just like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. So the
Yeah.
more they can reach those conclusions themselves, the more powerful the lesson will become. And
Yeah.
that's critically important when you're putting these curriculum together.
There's something that you said I want to just go back to right now is I talked about lectures being like 5 days, exhausting, people cutting up. One of the things I've now pivoted to over the years is that I do immersions, where if I have 30 concepts that I'm trying to deliver, I'll pick like seven and I'll spend like 2 days on those seven. And I'll do hands-on simulations. I'll go to the Gemba and I'll have them observe and do and try, just like you were saying. But one of the things that is it's really hard for leaders to do this, is failing is part of the process. And so letting people try things and it not work and they get frustrated and like that's part of the learning process.
Right.
And sometimes we try to isolate people in a room to teach them like here's how you do a waste walk. Okay. Are they going to go out and do a waste walk? Like and so like well, and no, have them go out do a waste walk. Well, tell them exactly what to do. Well, let's see how they do it first. Like let them struggle a little bit. Like maybe there's a PDCA cycle that we're going to use here. in as part of the learning process. And maybe that first immersion of 7 concepts, maybe give them like 2 or 3 months of doing these concepts before you add a few more. It's not a sprint. Like we're not trying to finish all 30 concepts in 5 days. Like maybe over a year we could do this. Because I could teach them all in 5 days and no one uses them after that. Or I could spread them over, so I'm not batching them over a year, and then each 2 months I insert an immersion of certain concepts. So I found that that work. But I have made a mistake in training in the past that I want to allude to before we come to a close, and that was sometimes we view leadership, the top executive team, that this is a spectator sport, where, oh, we're gonna do lean, let's train our people in lean. I don't need to be trained,
Right.
but everyone else needs to be trained. My leadership team is busy, they don't have time to get trained, but we're gonna set up training for the team leads and supervisors and managers. But you know, directors and VPs and myself, like we don't have time for this. And one of the things that I have now pivoted to is that if you're going to ask a team lead to go, everyone in the chain of command must have either go with you or have gone through it already. And the higher up I go, the more deliberate I am around the behavior they have to demonstrate. And so if it's waste walk that you're doing at the front line, then the top leader needs to exhibit being curious versus judgmental, understanding separate realities. And so understanding the behaviors that you need to conduct to activate that tool, so that they can demonstrate. So when the team lead is doing a waste walk, they're not coming down and scrutinizing them because they're exercising curiosity. And I have done it in the past where I would get calls and people come in to do training, and the GM or the VP, this is not, they don't have time for this right now. And I come back 2 years later, 3 years later, and realize nothing stuck really because the top saw it as a spectator sport.
I I totally agree. That's what commitment means. And I will actually turn clients down if it becomes clear that the leaders aren't willing to put that same kind of investment in. And it is funny watching them squirm, right? The executives, they'll come to me and say, John, we don't have time to do, 2 days of training. Can you give us the 2 hour version? And it's like, no, I mean, it's like, oh, you got to, if you really want to learn and be immersed, you've got to go through the same experience as everyone else. Or this is
Or
one of my
more.
favorites. I don't have time to attend, so I'm just going to sit in on bits and pieces of the class. And what that tells me is, and I've run into this, a lot of executives, not all, but a lot of them do have pretty big egos. And it's like the reason they don't want to be in the training is because they don't want to look like they don't have all the answers. They don't want to look like they don't know something. Or if they have to work on a team project, they don't want to look like they don't, they aren't the most knowledgeable person in the room.
Yeah.
So one way of skirting that is to say, yeah, I'm not going to attend the class, but I'll watch the class. And it's like, no, you got to, that's part of it is that when the people you're leading get to rub elbows with you and get to see you struggle just like they're struggling, now you become more relatable. You
Yeah.
become part of the team. You start to build trust. And that's what's missing a lot of times when lean fails
Yeah.
is there's not that connection, that sense of camaraderie. So when I have talked executives into attending, it's crazy what happens afterwards. It's that same 2 day experience. I'll see them having lunch together, a few days later.
Yeah.
That would have never happened before. Now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you have an executive sitting with a group of machinists. That's awesome.
That is.
So again, if they're not willing to do the same commitment that they're asking their people to make, it's like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And you're wasting my time and I'm wasting your time. So,
100%.
yeah.
100%. So, there's a lot to unpack here. I would just advise people to also like not shove too much jargon and be sensitive to culture when you're doing these things that I've, make sure that you're reading the room and make sure that people are engaged. But We have multiple episodes that are going to come after this that's going to dive deeper into training, talking about some of the techniques and roadmaps that we put out for people to follow and get developed as we go through this. So, John, this was a great episode. I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Very good. All right, everybody, take care.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.